So Revelation 1:19, and it's kind of pretty important here. John, who is receiving instructions from the Alpha and Omega, is told in 1:19 to write the things which thou hast seen, the things which are, and the things which shall be hereafter. Now, there are several keys to this book, but this is one of the more important keys. And I say several because depending on which avenue you're going to go down, you're going to need to put emphasis in certain places. Here, he's told to write the things which thou hast seen, past, the things which are present, and the things which shall be hereafter. And to give you an idea, the things which John had seen, if we're only going by Revelation thus far, would be Christ standing in the midst of the seven candlesticks. The things that pertain to the things which are, that pertain to the realities of the seven churches at Asia, which were actual churches, which I've also said by double interpretation may represent the church ages through time, and the things which shall be hereafter. That would essentially encompass chapters 4 through 22 of the book of Revelation. Now, in order to understand the book, there are several issues at hand, which unless we do these, we'll call them foundational teaching, the rest of it doesn't make sense. So with that introduction, remember, he says the things that he's seen, the things that are, and the things that will be afterwards. We need to look at the things which were seen in the past that are not yet, that will be. So the same principle essentially applies to the book of Daniel. And in order to make sense, as I said, of some of the things that appear in Revelation, we need the book of Daniel. The book of Daniel is set in the period of the Babylonian Empire. I have already said, if you were listening on Festival, chapters 1:1 through 2:4a are in Hebrew, and 2:4b through 7:28 are in the imperial form of the Aramaic language. And somebody asked me, does that make a difference? And yes, it does. There were several, just like the development of English, there were several periods of development in the Aramaic language. This appears, by what I can find and by what I can discern, to be the imperial form. Then, after 728, we have chapters 8 through 12 that pick up again in the Hebrew, which in the Hebrew, interestingly enough, there are some Aramaisms, that is Aramaic-like sayings, and a few Persian loan words tossed in for good measure. So, in order to understand, we're going to jump into the second chapter, but before we do, I want to write some history on my tablet. So this will make sense, and I'm going to put here Neb, that stands for Nebuchadnezzar, 604 to 562. Even if you don't like history, I really need you to pay attention. You don't have to memorize any of this, but it becomes extremely fruitful to understand the progression of this kingdom, that when we read the second chapter and we have the interpretation of the dream that Daniel will tell the king what he saw, it's helpful to understand what has happened. So after a lengthy campaign, Nebuchadnezzar moves into Syria. King Jehoiakim of Judah voluntarily submits to Nebuchadnezzar at that time, and a few Jews are taken out of Jerusalem to Babylon. There were a few waves of deportation. In 601, Nebuchadnezzar marches against Egypt. Both sides suffer losses. Nebuchadnezzar withdraws to Babylon. This is very interesting. In doing so, to refresh and reload his army, Pharaoh Necho, you can find all of this in the Bible, by the way. Jeremiah 46 is the passage about Pharaoh Necho, makes no further attempts to advance into Syria. But the news of Babylon kind of pulling back triggers Jehoiakim, who is unmoved and undeterred by Jeremiah's preaching, to stop sending tribute to Babylon and to make a renewed alliance with Egypt. In 597, really don't want to take up the space there, Nebuchadnezzar sends troops to besiege Jerusalem. Jehoiakim dies. His son Jehoiachin becomes a puppet king, which later we would recognize the last puppet king, Zedekiah, who eventually, his sons are killed in front of him. His eyes, King Zedekiah's eyes, are plucked out, and he's sent into captivity, marched off into Babylon. A hard date is 586. That is the fall of Jerusalem. Jerusalem is looted and burned. And this is very important. These are all pegs in time, which we can trace back historically. There's no one that's going to argue this, and there's a reason why I'm doing this. Seems very laborious. Indulge me. It'll pay off big time. It seems that Nebuchadnezzar's friendly relationship with the Medes, and I say friendly, was interrupted by an eclipse in 585, and until Nebuchadnezzar leaves the scene, he's going to be suspicious of this Median Empire. He dies, Nebuchadnezzar, in 562. His son, whose name is Evil Merodach, or Amel Marduk, who is killed in a revolution. His successor is the biblical Neriglissar. Let me write down his, and we're just going to call him Neri because I don't have the space. His name is Neriglissar, though, all right? And we're putting him down at 559 to 556. Now, Neriglissar was married to one of Nebuchadnezzar's daughters. That's the relationship. And the facts around his death are very obscure, so don't ask me. And by the way, if you try and read history books, almost every history book has a different type of reckoning. So if you go to search this out on your own, you may find some of the dates vary. And my dates are based upon weaving the Bible passages together and then going to the history books and kind of making lines and arrows. You wouldn't want to be there. All right. So now, after Neri, this is Nabonidus, 555 to 539. Once he ascends, he's going to leave Babylon. And he leaves Babylon for 10 years. And in the 10 years while he is gone, his son becomes regent of Babylon. His son's name is Belshazzar. So when people try to line up Daniel, they say, well, who are these people? This is why it's important to understand. So let's put here, son is Belshazzar. Not with the T, that's Daniel's name, but Belshazzar. Now, Nabonidus goes off to northwest Arabia, to Taima, for 10 years, and then for whatever the reason, he decides to come back. Just before he comes back, we have the passage in Daniel that has the night of Belshazzar's drunken feast, where he's found weighed in the balance, and that passage closes with, he was slain that night, and then we have Darius taking the reign in that, I think it's verse 31 of the 5th chapter, 531. Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. Okay, so now we have established some hard points, if you will. It says that Darius, let's be very, very careful about this. It says that Darius the Mede is now ruling. That's what that 531 I just read to you. And what's important about this is that a lot of people are confused when they go to look at history and they try to figure out the Medo-Persian Empire. We immediately know that Cyrus was the great leader who it's chronicled of him in 2 Chronicles, and Ezra is the one that made the decree for the people to return. We know that the name of Cyrus was spoken before he was born. We know there's a lot in the Bible about Cyrus, but there are some interesting, I don't even know that they're historical, but there's certainly interesting stories about Cyrus, and one of them is that while Darius is listed here in Daniel 5:31 as the next ruler after Belshazzar, we have one of the princes, Cambyses, marries the daughter of the Median king Astyages. And if you remember, I told this story before, it's so very bizarre. His daughter becomes pregnant, and he has a dream about the baby that's in his daughter's belly as a vine that would essentially grow and take over the whole earth. So he thinks, I better get rid of this child as soon as it's born. I'll have somebody else, because it's still of royal descent. We'll have somebody else do it and kill the child. Talk about cowardice. So as soon as the baby is born, the baby is ushered off into the wilderness, and it just so happens that a shepherd man and his wife, she just gave birth to a stillborn baby who died, and they basically found that baby, swapped babies. They took baby Cyrus to themselves, and the dead baby was presented as the dead Cyrus, because no one wanted to do the deed of killing a royal child. Cyrus eventually grows up and finds out who he really is, and essentially then takes his rightful reign. Astyages yields to him, and he takes his rightful reign. So let's put down under here Cyrus. Now, I tried to get some dates for you. The one thing we know is that Cyrus is killed in 530. Cyrus's son Cambyses will succeed him, and Egypt, the empire, is essentially restored, brought into, encompassed into the territory and kingdom under another Darius. And that's why I said it's very confusing. If you don't know history, there are several Cambyseses, there are several Dariuses. Which one? You got to know the dates, which is why I'm doing this crazy exercise here. So let's put down two other names, Cambyses, and right beneath him, Xerxes. That pretty much takes you, by the way, Xerxes is assassinated, and then his younger son, Artaxerxes. And let's jump all the way down here to the date of 331 BC. And here we encounter Alexander the Great, who is crossing the Euphrates. Very interesting battle. He's essentially taken all of the Eastern Empire, the Eastern Mediterranean Empire, including Egypt, is set to do battle with Darius III, is about to cross the Euphrates on two pontoon-type bridges with 7,000 horsemen, and I believe the number is 30,000 infantry. Kind of a staggering, must have been quite a spectacle. Darius underestimated Alexander, and of course, Alexander wins, takes the territory, and essentially, let's give a final date here, 323, Alexander the Great dies. Okay, so when we get into Daniel, what we are stepping into is a world where Nebuchadnezzar is king, and if you want to do your own fact-finding, you can comb through specifically Jeremiah's record, which will tell about Nebuchadnezzar coming and all the destruction that incurred and the carrying away of the people. Now Daniel is in Babylon. They all ended up in Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. That's the beginning of chapter 2. And it says, his spirit was troubled, his sleep brake from him. And the king commanded to call the magicians and the astrologers, sorcerers, and the Chaldeans, for to show the king his dream. So they came and stood before the king. Now, this is what I tried to explain the other night on festival. It seems self-evident to me. Up until the 4th verse, the introduction and whatnot is in Hebrew, and beginning at the 4th verse, halfway through the verse will begin to be in Aramaic for this reason. The king said unto them, I have dreamed a dream. My spirit was troubled to know the dream. Then spake the Chaldeans to the king in Syriac. Hence is why we're now dealing with Aramaic. O king, they didn't speak Hebrew. O king, live forever, tell thy servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the thing is gone from me. I can't remember. And if you can't tell me what I dreamed, well, it's not going to be a happy ending for you. You're going to be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made a dunghill. That's verse 5. Nice man. But if you show the dream and the interpretation, not enough to just tell what you dream, but you also have to say the interpretation. This is like naming all the people on the Titanic. You shall receive of me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore show me the dream and the interpretation thereof. They answered again and said, "Let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation of it." The king answered and said, "I know of a certainty that you would gain the time, because you see the thing is gone from me. I can't help you. I don't remember. But if you'll not make known unto me the dream, there's but one decree for you. For you have prepared lying and corrupt words to speak before me till the time be changed. Therefore tell me the dream, show me the money, and I shall know that you can show me the interpretation thereof." The Chaldeans answered before the king and said, "There is not a man upon the earth that can show the king's matter. Therefore there is no king, lord, no ruler that asks such things at any magician, astrologer, or Chaldean." Now what comes of this ultimately is there's a decree that's going to be issued that all the wise men, all these smart advisors of every type should be slain, which, by the way, would also include Daniel and his friends. So we have Daniel entering into this equation. He asks, why is this decree so hasty from the king? And then it's told to him. Then Daniel went in, verse 16, desired of the king that he would give him time, that he would show the king the interpretation. Man, you know, that guy must have been literally on his hands and knees. "Lord, okay, I've opened my mouth now. You better help me out here," right? Then Daniel went to his house, made the thing known to Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, his companions, that they would desire mercies of the God of heaven concerning this secret, but that Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. So it was revealed to him. In this whole passage, that's why I said you need to tune in to Festival when I teach on certain words. This whole passage is loaded with, if you were reading this in the Septuagint, which is the Greek of the Greek form, the Greek Old Testament translated from the Hebrew, you would see that each time it reads revealeth, revealeth. We're dealing with the same word for our English word apocalypse, which is the same word being understood for the revelation, the apocalypse of Jesus Christ. There's peppered in here these words that are no accident. So prayer and petition, God reveals this to him, and then Daniel goes in before the king, and he's now going to tell him, jump with me over to verse 31. "Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms silver, his belly and sides," should properly read, "of brass, legs of iron, his feet of part of iron, part clay." And now, verse 34, "Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet, that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces." Now, he goes on to explain. He says what the dream is. This is the dream, verse 36, and I've skipped over a little bit. "And we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king." So that's the dream. Here's the interpretation. "O king, thou, O king, art a king of kings." And if you think that's a typo, interestingly enough, Ezekiel 26:7 refers to Nebuchadnezzar the very same way, King of kings. "For the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power and strength and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of heaven hath given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them. Thou art this head of gold." Okay. You are the head of gold. "And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth." So another kingdom inferior to thee. It's supposed to be a man, I guess. We need to make it look a little bit better here. All right. Not sure where this is going. And he may be a man with short legs, by the way, so bear with me. All right. Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom will span until here. So all of this head of gold, although specifically here, I should be clear to say that he is the only one being referred to specifically. "Thou art this head of gold." That's the Babylonian kingdom. Babylonian kingdom. another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass. So another kingdom inferior to thee. And we've got here, we've got the Medo-Persian Empire, which, although there may be a few short breaks in between, pretty much all of these are complete. These will make up, let's take a look at this now, the arms. We have to kind of make the arms, it's going to make the arms long, but let's make the arms look like they're like this. Here, let's make big arms. That doesn't look too good, but it doesn't matter. And then another third kingdom of brass, kind of like that. Another kingdom of brass. I'm not sure where this is going to end up. This does not look good for me here. All right, let's put a little box over. This is censored, all right? And tell you what, got to make the box just a little bit smaller. I'm going to try. I know I'm blushing right now. I'm going to try. All right, I told you they're going to be short legs. So that's an ankle. Wow, don't trust Pastor Scott to draw anything just yet. All right, and that's a kind of misshapen leg right there. And that's another foot. He's got duck feet. All right. Yeah, some of you are enjoying this artistic endeavor. And you know, I'm sorry, I have to change this. All right, let's try and get this back here. So we got this part here, which is referring to the Okay, well, you're never going to forget this. I'm trying not to. Let's keep it together. All right, so thou art this head of gold. After thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee. And we know that the Medo-Persian Empire comes up. And then another third kingdom of brass, which represents the Alexander the Great, the Grecian, which should be kind of this, whatever this part is down here. All right, representing that, which shall bear rule over all the earth. The fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all things, these shall it break in pieces and bruise. Now we're going to go from, we're talking about the legs and the feet, and now let's go to, oh boy, here comes the drawing. So these look like paddles, but they're actually feet. Those are ankles. Let's take away the little bobble right there. That looks like platypus feet. All right. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part iron and part clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave to one another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. Now we go down to the legs, and we'll call it this area right here. And what is not in this list is the Roman Empire. That's not listed here, but it's in the mix until we get down to the 10 toes, which are important. All of these, again, think of this particular statue as a bird's eye view, the big picture. And as you get into the book, it will get a little bit more magnified, more focused until Daniel will come down to give the exact precision of what we're dealing with and who we're dealing with. Right now, here's the big picture. Keep in mind, and this is what's really important, this is why I did this kind of crazy history. Keep in mind that if Daniel was taken out of Jerusalem in 604, and let's just hypothesize, this is a hypothetical idea, that he might have been maybe about the age of 13, and hypothetically he lived, because it says in one of the chapters it was the first year of Darius. He lived into the reign of both Darius and Cyrus, but let's just hypothesize. He had to have lived the span of minimally 9 96 years, because he will later on read, and he's finding in the book that it was written where Jeremiah said 70 years and not more, not a day more than 70 years for the people to be in captivity. And he was part of that captivity. He was part of probably the first wave taken. So he's writing in his lifetime as a foreteller. And we may say, well, of course, he lived during Nebuchadnezzar's reign. And we know he lived during Belshazzar's reign because you'll find his name in Daniel. And we know that he lived during Darius and also during Cyrus, taking us to at least the end of Cyrus's life, 530. But beyond this, none of this was in Daniel's lifetime, from Cambyses on through Rome. And when Daniel is interpreting the dream, he's talking about things that have not yet come to pass. Nebuchadnezzar is still the head of the empire. There's no such thing as Nabonidus. There's no such thing as Belshazzar. There's no such thing as Darius or Cyrus. So we have to be very careful. Many people have argued that this book is a later forgery because they don't want to accept the prophetic revelation that was given to Daniel. But unfortunately, what happens is if you reject the prophetic revelation given to Daniel and you reject the precision of his prophecies, as I said, big picture, we just looked at the big picture, which will get under a magnifying glass a little bit more, closer, 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 until you can see crystal clear. There's no way that he could have seen that far ahead. We're talking about Daniel foretelling things, naming people, or talking about people such as Cleopatra, or such as Berenice, and there's so many historical personages in here, it's impossible. You know, maybe you luck out one time, but all the way through, it's, oh, geez, that's pretty hard. So what do we have here? Let's take a look at this. Let me finish reading. We'll go back to my drawing, and then we'll skip forward. Now, verse 44, it says, in the days of these kings. So I want you to think of the 10 toes as what will be referred to at some point as either toes, kings, or horns. Okay? So here he says, and in the days of these kings, referring to the toes. That's what I wanted. That's why I wanted to draw this, as kooky as it is. For some people who've never seen this before, they'll say, well, I don't understand this. In the days of these kings, which is referring to a specific thing being said. In prophecy, a lot of times, the prophet is speaking. Isaiah did it. Ezekiel does it. Daniel does it. Many prophets will do this, including Joel, including Zephaniah, where they're in the middle of talking about something. They're in the middle of talking, and they go straight from one thing to another without you even knowing it if you didn't know what they were talking about. Right in the middle of this, in the days of these kings, and he's referring to the toes, he's also referring to an event that will happen. In the days of these kings, Antichrist. Before shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. There's a break in that. We'll talk about that maybe in the next message or on festival about the gap. That's everywhere in prophecy. Everywhere you turn, you will encounter it. But right here, in the days of these kings, referring to the toes, because what will happen is, as Nebuchadnezzar now is out of the scene, and as Belshazzar is out of the scene, and as Darius and Cyrus are out of the scene, and when Alexander the Great dies, and the rise of the Roman Empire, which is the legs clear down, as I said, going to the feet, but excluding the toes, if you will. And many have tried to say the Roman Empire, whether you want to say the Eastern and Western divisions comprise the two legs. I prefer not to do that because that's far-fetched. But at the end of days, what we will encounter in the book of Revelation, I'm hoping to get there today, at the end of days will be spoken of this, we'll call it a loose confederate of the old Roman Empire. Do not think of Rome. You've got to think of the territories that Nebuchadnezzar held, that were referring to Babylon, then what was taken by Darius and Cyrus, the Medo-Persian, combined with the empire that Alexander the Great took, which was from India to the Hellespont, and then Rome. Do not think Rome proper as in Rome, the Vatican. Think of the Roman Empire surrounding these particular territories, which, by the way, included Egypt and Syria and Turkey and what is modern-day Iran and Iraq. Think of it that way. Do not think beyond the scope of that. We're strictly talking about a territory. And in these last days, now we're jumping ahead to a time unknown. A loose confederate, still, I would say, bound together by some means, 10 toes or 10 kings or 10 horns, out of this will come Antichrist. And that's important because when we get into the book of Revelation, you're going to see the same symbols will be repeated, and you'll then be able to know what John is talking about. Otherwise, it makes absolutely no sense. Now, we're going to go from what we just saw. Let's go to chapter 7 now. Daniel 7. We're skipping over some things, but as I said, you can only do so much in one time. The first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed. He wrote the dream, told the sum of the matters. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven strove upon the great sea. Now, this is really important because not every time, but most of the time when you encounter upon the sea, out of the sea, usually it is going to mean out of the vast sea of peoples, out of a populace, not waters. And you'll find the same language in Revelation 13:1. I'm praying we're going to get there today, so let's just stay the course. Four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion. Lion. We're still on the head, except now I'm putting lion there. The first was like a lion, representing Babylon. Don't get confused with the Lion of Judah. This is representing Babylon. If you know anything about the history of the gates of Ishtar, or all the palaces with the lions and all the representation of the lions, winged lions, like a lion, that's Babylon, had eagle's wings. And I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. Behold, another beast, a second, like a bear. That's encompassing, we're now down to this part here. That is the Medo-Persian Empire, all right? Like a bear, raised up itself on one side, had 3 ribs in its mouth between the teeth of it. That's one part of the kingdom that was stronger than the other. In the Medo-Persian, because they were a combined empire, they weren't necessarily combined, but they became essentially an amalgamation of the two, one that overtook or was stronger than the other. And they said thus to it, Arise, devour much flesh. And after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard. We run out of space a little bit here. Like a leopard. That's representing Alexander the Great's kingdom, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl, and the beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given unto it. 4 wings and 4 heads, representing Alexander the Great's 4 generals that would succeed him. He had no children to pass on his kingdom. When he died, his 4 generals split the territory, and these 4 wings, these 4 heads, are his 4 generals. And it says, and dominion was given unto it. That is this leopard beast, if you will. After this I saw in the night visions, and beheld a 4th beast, dreadful, terrible, strong exceedingly. It had great iron teeth. If you go back and read at your own convenience in the 2nd chapter, you'll read the same thing being described of the Roman Empire. It devoured and brake in pieces, stamped the residue with the feet of it, and it was diverse from all the beasts. And it goes immediately from the Roman Empire and sweeps directly into the thing that now says it had 10 horns. Remember I just said to you, 10 kings, 10 toes, 10 horns? So you can understand we're dealing with the same thing. So now we have the Roman Empire. Now excluding, because we haven't dealt with the toes yet here, 10 horns, I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn. Okay, let's do this. That's a little horn. That is Antichrist. Anytime you read little horn that coming up, the little horn that comes up, Antichrist. Before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots, That'll be important for later, because 3 were plucked up. And behold, his horns were eyes like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking great things. And I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, wheels as burning fire. And what we see here is, again, another semblance, just like we saw in 2, the portion I didn't read, which tells about all these kingdoms, and then tells about the stone kingdom, which is representing the kingdom that Christ will set up, and then referring to the Ancient of Days, referring to the Son of Man, referring to the coming of Christ. But let's push on a little bit here, because I told you I'd go slow, and I'm holding up my part of the deal here. Read with me in verse 17. These great beasts, which are 4 kings, which shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Then I would know the truth of the 4th beast, which was diverse from all others, exceedingly dreadful. Doesn't this sound the same thing? Whose teeth are of iron, whose nails of brass, which devoured, brake in pieces, stamped with the residue of his feet, and of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spake great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. And I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them. Now, here we have, in each one of these vignettes, we have, this is that same horn making war with the saints. This is Antichrist and tribulation saints. There will be people who will be here in the tribulation, who will be saved in the tribulation by those preachers who are stamped and ordained to preach to the people who remain, who will be saved. That's another subject. I'm sorry, it's like I'm trying to stay on focus here. It's very hard not to get distracted. Bad enough what I did with the statue. Verse 23, he said, the 4th beast shall be the 4th kingdom upon earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down, break it into pieces. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise. Remember, I said to you, toes, kings, horns. And another shall arise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and to think to change times and laws. And they shall be given into his hand until the times, and the dividing of times. Time representing 1 year, times representing 2 years, and dividing of times half, 3.5 years. So I taught on festival. The period of the tribulation, the Great Tribulation, is 7 years. Antichrist comes on the scene as a peacemaker, and in the middle of the 7 years, 3.5 right there in the middle, he breaks a peace treaty, and he is revealed for what he is. But before then, he speaks great swelling words, flattery. So you can get an idea that each one of these, we're now narrowing down. We started with this bird's eye view. It's getting a little bit more focused. Come on, bear with me. We can do this. Here in the 8th chapter, the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first. Now he's busy telling he was at the palace in Shushan, which is in the province of Elam, saw in a vision, and I was by the river Ulai. Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram, which had 2 horns. And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. That's the Medo-Persian Empire. Remember, one was stronger than the other. So 2 horns, one came up last, the one that was higher, that came up the last. Those are that Medo-Persian Empire. And I saw a ram pushing westward and northward and southward. Think of territories as they were conquered, so that no beast might stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will and became great. And as I was considering, behold, a he-goat, this poor guy, rams, goats, bears, lions, it's a veritable zoo in his brain. A he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth and touched not the ground. Now it's narrowed down. We went from talking about Nebuchadnezzar, and then we talked about the lion, the bear, the leopard. Now we're down to 2 things. we're down to the ram, which is the same as the bear, and the he-goat, which is the same as the leopard. And touch not the ground. He is Alexander the Great's so quick, swift move in conquering. Touch not the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. And put a footnote there somewhere. The notable horn is being referenced to this same thing that I drew right here as a horn that came out of the 10. It's not the same, but it is of the same likeness, a notable horn. Now, some people who are historians will completely shudder when I say this because they're going to try and make history be exactly this, and they don't want to face the reality. But Alexander the Great, he was a very, very well-educated man. He was also a spiritual man. When I say spiritual, he consulted every type of oracle, every type of astrologer, anybody that could be consulted, he consulted. And when it came to his execution of battle tactics, unmatched. Now, I believe, without question, based on the right interpretation of these scriptures and based on history, this man was possessed by a demon spirit. That doesn't mean that he was demonic as in his head was spinning round and round. He was possessed by a spirit. And the spirit is not just any ordinary spirit, but what is being referred to as a notable horn between his eyes. And the reason why I say that is because in Revelation, it will talk about in a later chapter, I believe it's 17, when referring to John being told now to write the things which were, well, they were, they are not in John's day, and they will be again. Speaking of the same notable horn that once possessed Alexander the Great, that in John's day was not, but at a future time will be again. And if you think this is confusing, don't worry, because I know we will not only repeat this teaching on festival or during the week, but I'm also going to do another review before we go anywhere else. So if you don't want to hear a review and you're not interested, then I can't help you. But if you're interested, we'll do it again, probably without all the history at the front to be able to go forward. Now, verse 6, he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing before the river, ran unto him in the fury of his power. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, smote the ram, brake his 2 horns, and there was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground, stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven. And these, by the way, 4 notable horns, we're now talking again. Horns represent power in Scripture. 4 horns will talk about his generals. And out of one of them came forth a little horn. Now, have you heard enough today to know what the little horn is? Yes, Antichrist. So out of the territory of these 4 generals, the successors to Alexander the Great's divided kingdom, out of one of those territories will come a little horn. That means when people say, well, where will Antichrist come from? Does he exist already in the earth today? Is he here? Is he around? And the answer is the spirit of Antichrist, the spirit of lawlessness, Paul said in 2 Thessalonians, is already at work, the spirit of iniquity. In fact, John also spoke of that in 1 John. But what must be understood is this little horn that was in this day as prophecy being foretold of Alexander the Great. And when Alexander the Great dies, something happens. The power that he possessed is gone. Now, whether you like this or not, the power that possessed him went into the pit, disappeared, it's gone. It's still around, but it has not yet taken up in the form and the person who will be the person of Antichrist who first comes on the scene as a peacemaker. I know that, a lot of people think, wow, that's convoluted. But when you start to match up all of these scriptures, you realize something. The Bible's saying the same thing over and over again, which tells you can pretty much stand on what has been foretold, which at the time it was being told was not history, and some part of it now is. The rest of it that's yet to happen, you can pretty much say God will make it come to pass just like that. Let's continue on. So a little horn came forth, which waxed exceeding great toward the south, toward the east, and towards the pleasant land. And it waxed great even to the host of heaven, cast down some of the host of the stars to the ground, stamped upon them. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. If you keep reading, you'll get the interpretation. I'm going to jump all the way over now to verse 20. The ram which thou sawest having 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia. Isn't that what I just said? Yes, ma'am. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia, Alexander the Great. And the horn, the great horn that is between his eyes, is the first king. This is very interesting. Now that being broken, whereas 4 stood up for it, 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. Why? Because the power that possessed him is not operating there anymore, and will not be operating until a certain time, which we'll know about in the book of Revelation. Not in his power. Now, you have to know history to know that when these 4 generals spun out, and I'm going to run out of time, but when they spun out, not one of them held the same power position. Not one of them had the same skill or mindset as a tactician or as someone to understand the battle and conquering. It's as if if you read history, you find that these kingdoms slowly and slowly and slowly kind of just, they dissolve. And the kingdom per se does not have the power. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. Here Antichrist appears again. And his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. So you have to understand something. The reason why this big picture is to show the kingdoms, we're not dealing with the kingdoms of the world, we're dealing with a territory. Most people, when they come to teach prophecy, they want to make this thing encompass the whole world, that the consequences of these events will encompass the whole world. But initially, there's a reason why we're talking about this certain territory. The territory out of which Antichrist will come, and the territory later on referred to as the king of the south and the king of the north, which will be 2 territories that will fight over Israel, caught in the middle, back and forth, which will keep going until a future time when we learn about what will happen to the king of the north and the king of the south. But right now, it's safe to say we've got a lot of confirmation. We've got a lot of things that are being confirmed. If you want to see it a little bit more, we could keep going, and I certainly would like to keep going. But let's narrow it down to the 2 kingdoms, and then we'll go to Revelation, see if we can bring all this together, at least as an introduction to what we're doing here. Chapter 11. Also I, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm and to strengthen him. And now will I show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia. The 4th shall be far richer than they all, and by his strength through his riches he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. If we were going to do some history, I could go into great detail, but I think I don't want to introduce anything more than to show you what's said here. A mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, and be divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, and not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion for which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be plucked up. This is probably the key to all this, even for others beside those. For his kingdom shall be plucked up. And I want you to think of it this way. If you understand where people will make an interpretation, I believe, to lean heavily on this, that his kingdom, the power of his kingdom, was plucked up. The power of his kingdom was plucked up and is no more. It exists, but it is not now. It will be revealed again, but it is not now. The king of the south shall be strong, one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion. And I could just keep going because you've got the north and the south being referred to back and forth, and the north and the south, the king of the south. We're talking about 2 territories, as I said, that will fight over Israel. And why is this important? Why are we focusing on this? It's almost, as I said, we started with the big picture, magnifying glass, getting a little closer. Now we're down to these two kingdoms, and then we'll pinpoint it down to one kingdom, one territory, because out of that Seleucid territory, out of what is Iran, Iraq, Turkey, not all of Turkey, but a portion of Turkey, that whole area, that is where Antichrist will come up out of. And he will not come up as someone whose head is turning, whose eyes have lights, and, I'm Antichrist. He's going to come as a man of peace. He's exactly what happens in Revelation 6 when Christ, the Lamb opens up the seals, and we have the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And there's that first one on the white horse who comes on a white horse, white being the symbol of peace, horse, power, bow and no arrow, to conquer, going forth to conquer and conquering, if you want to say it like that. But at that point, he is still a peace man. People talk about, should I be worried about all this happening now? And the only thing I would say to you is worry when somebody comes on the scene who begins to say everyone is going to sit down in that territory and we're going to sign an agreement that we're all going to get together, we're going to hold hands, we're going to be brothers, we're going to be peaceful Palestinians and Jews and Egyptians and Iraqis. We're all going to sit there, we're going to be brothers. Some other things have to happen before then, but just note to self, that's probably why some people would like to make interpretations of things that are not. Now, why I said this is important, we're dealing first with territory. Remember, the angel comes to Daniel and he says, this is the thing that is pronounced upon thy people and thy holy city. And speaking of thy people, the Jews, and please do not get confused when I say the Jews, we're talking about the people who came out of Judah. They were first called Jews because they came out of Yehuda, Judah, the territory of Judah, not as a derogatory or slide remark. First to thy people and to thy holy city. And the effects of all of this will then push out in future time in the rest of the world. But until that time, eyes are focused on that part of the world. Now, why did I do all of this? Let's jump ahead to Revelation now and see why. Because there's just no way to understand how this will make any sense if you were starting to read, and I'm in chapter 17, at verse 7. The angel said unto me, wherefore didst thou marvel? Because he sees something previously that I'll teach on. But I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and the beast that carrieth her, which hath 7 heads and 10 horns. And this is why you need to have the symbolism that we just covered to understand what we're dealing with. The beast that thou sawest was, and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition, and they that dwell in the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, and is not in John's day, and yet is. In other words, what John is looking at, what was, we just looked at it, the power that was, that in John's day is not, but in future time will be. Does that make sense? And here is the mind which hath wisdom. 7 heads are the 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. There are 7 kings, 5 are fallen. We'll do this in another lesson. And the other one is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th. We're talking about what now has come out of the pit and is of the 7th and goeth into perdition. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind. They shall give their power and strength unto the beast. They're just going to hand it over. Now we're talking about a future time, something that has not yet happened. There are many people who would like to make this book history, but it has not yet happened. And that's why I said when people say, well, this scares me, this is all very scary stuff, it shouldn't. What it should do is it should tell you with such precision how, through the mouth of the prophet looking so far ahead, we have these details to give us encouragement. We have these details to let us know that, as the world says, gosh, I don't know what to do. Everything's turning around me so quickly. My world's falling apart. No, no, your world's not falling apart, but the world will fall apart one day, and you being in Christ shall not be a part of that world falling apart. The only thing you have to understand is prophecy should be designed to solidify your faith that whatever you're going through at present, as Peter said, whatever tribulation, whatever things you're suffering at present, count them, as Paul said, for something very small in the time that you're experiencing them. Why? Because the time that remains, whatever that time is, they've been saying now for 100 and 200 years that we're in the last days, but we are in the last days, whatever the last days period is, to see exactly what people do. They come into church and they don't want to know. This takes concentration. It takes enduring my drawings. It takes really harnessing the mind. People want to come in and they want to be entertained. They want to have every single message be something that was fun. I talked to a lady who said, well, I want to bring my kids to a place where they'll have a good time. And I'm thinking to myself, well, then take them to an amusement park. But when you come to church, you tell your kids, when you come to church, you tell your kids, no matter what they learn in school and no matter what else is going on in their life, there's no more important subject or person to learn about than God, God's plan as He revealed it in the past and made good on it, in the present for our lives, for His will in our lives, and for the future that He has promised. For many of you that walk around saying there is no justice and there is no vindication and there is no, recognize that in the book it tells us there is a day of judgment. There is a day of vengeance. There is a day that comes for you and for me, and that day will be when Christ appears. For all the people that said, oh no, and He's already come, and you're living a delusion. When Christ appears, my Bible tells me every eye shall see Him, every eye, including those people who rejected Him, whom Zechariah says, they'll look upon Him whom they pierced, and they will mourn, recognizing this indeed is the Messiah, Jesus Christ, the Messiah of God, come to take His people. Now listen to me. So much more to do in this. We just laid the foundation. It's only an introduction, so I hope you'll come back and we can maybe pick up from here, short review, and pick up from here and move forward into the book of Revelation. That's my message. I'm Pastor Melissa Scott, pastor of Faith Center, Glendale, California. I teach every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. If you'd like to attend services with us, simply call the 800 number, that is 800-338-3030, to join us. If you'd like to watch, listen, and learn 24 hours a day, simply log on to our website at www.pastormelissascott.com.